Hi and welcome. Today we're going to be focusing on some vintage cutaways using some botanical prints from the 1600s, and we are going to be creating these on a matte film so that they can be translucently placed in our art journals, or they could be a standalone piece as well. So here is a journal entry that is in progress, and you can see that when you place the opacity of the vintage print on top, you can still see some of the details that lie underneath, but it kind of creates a masking or an opaque finish on top of what could be a little bit more chaotic imagery or color work underneath. And this way you can just position it anywhere in the journal entry that you like while still preserving the integrity of the page. So we're going to look at how to create these together, and some materials that we're going to be using for the vintage botanical prints. I printed them on the Computer Grafix Matte Film for inkjet. So you can use any copyright-free or royalty-free image. You can even use vintage photographs, etc. But it has to be the matte film for inkjet so that you can print on them. There is a Duralar matte film as well that you could paint on directly. But if you want to actually print imagery, then you would need the computer graphics. We're also going to use some isopropyl alcohol. This is a 91%. I'm going to use my favorite Black Silver Dynasty brushes to just do some manipulation with the material once we get it on the film. And then of course we're going to be using a fantastic array of the new Marabu Sketch Marker graphics. These are the alcohol based, and they're dual tip, so they have both a thick and a thin tip application on them, and they're very juicy. There's just a really abundant amount of pigment that comes out of them, and we'll be using the alcohol and the brushes to manipulate that. So let's get started and take a look. This is our little vignette. You can also, we have like this standalone frame that I got from the craft store, and you can put the vignette inside and treat it like a standalone picture, and you can also paint the frame. And then of course, because it is somewhat transparent, it will allow that light to pass through it, so it can act kind of like a window decal as well. When you put it up near a window, you'll get some natural light shining through. So lots of fun options with this project. So what I've done is I did take a botanical print, and you can see how beautifully and clean that the imagery transposes onto the computer graphics film. So very fortunate for that. And once I have the image printed on there, you want to allow probably 10 to 15 seconds at least before you move the image, but at least a good minute to 5 minutes for the ink to set and dry before you handle it, so you don't get any smearing. Also, I'm very careful about making sure that my hands are completely clean. We have oils on our hands, so either washing your hands or using a gloved hand to manipulate the piece is helpful. And I'm going to turn it face down. I just have a smooth tile surface that I'm going to be working on because my table's white, so I wanted to be able to see, but I'm turning it face down so that the image you can see will be a little less intense with value. It's going to show a little bit more of the decrease. And if we look back at the piece that we started with, you can see how intense the colors are on the back of the piece, and how, you know, they're not as finessed, but when you flip it over, they look more vintage and smoky because of the matte film finish, which is one of the advantages to it. So what we're going to do is I'm going to start off with my lighter colors. So I'm going to take this really awesome light lime green. It's color 960, and I'm going to use the thicker portion of the tip first. And I've got some of the rubbing alcohol in this little jar, so I'm just going to go ahead and take the top off of that. You want to work in a well ventilated area so you don't have to fixate on the smell. And then I've got a little paper towel here that I can just kind of dip my brush in, and then I'm going to leave my Dynasty brushes right here close at hand. So I've got all that set up, and I'm just going to take the sketch marker, and I'm just going to create with my light colors, and I'm just going to follow the contouring of the surface with the light colors, It doesn't have to be exact. I'm just depositing color down, creating this nice blended green. Beautiful lime green color. Okay, and I don't want an area to sit too long, so I'm just going to do one little leaf at a time. And I'm going to take one of my wider brushes here, dip it in the alcohol, and then I'm just going to tap it on the paper towel to get rid of excess alcohol. And then I'm just going to use it in a very painterly fashion to move this treated material around the surface. So because these are alcohol-based markers, they will activate again with alcohol, and you'll get some really beautiful bleeding. Now we're just laying down a primary color, so there's not going to be a lot, but I am using it to smooth these rough edges, and you can see when I'm tapping on my paper towel the color residue that's being left behind. So I'm just going to move that color around the image. Tapping in and smoothing out on the film. The film has such a smooth glass-like surface, the brush just glides across. And the Dynasty Black Silver brush just really grabs the material, but it's also got a firm yet flexible tip so that I don't have to worry about the brush losing its shape and putting the pigment in a place where I don't want it. Now the only thing I'm being cautious of is when I get to the edges here, just making sure, and you can always pick a tool for the job. So if you want something a little bit more detail oriented, you can go to your smaller brush and just move that pigment around. I'm just trying to keep it within the lines, within reason, so that I can continue my surface. Make sure all that paint's out. And then, once I have that piece down, you can also use your paper towel to absorb any excess that you have going on, but I've got the light color deposited. Now I'm gonna go with my fine tip, and the alcohol evaporates very quickly, so I don't have a lot of time to go back in and add some while it's still being wet, but what I can do is keep adding layers of alcohol. So I'm just gonna put some of the darker green, and I would see that light would be hitting the top part of this, so you can see where your dark values are in the print and how the lines are closer together. So I'm just imitating some of that where I think it would be darker. There's not much of it that's going to show up through the black, so again I'm just kind of sketching out. You don't have to be a fine drawer, but this is a great way to practice because you can just follow the contour shapes and create your own drawing. And that way I've got some fine lines there, and then I'm just going to come back and duplicate the same process. I've got my rubbing alcohol here, and I don't even have to clean the brush completely. The fact that it's got a little bit of the light lime green in there is fine, but I'm just softening down these lines, and look at how beautifully the colors just blend together. You can leave as much of that hard line as you would like from the marker, but you've got some of that really awesome blended color, just really soft touches with the rubbing alcohol that just allows for some amazing color shift. And you can just see that beautiful color detail there. Let me get a close up of that. And when I flip it over, you'll be able to see that it's very muted, very soft. So, you know, really enjoy that. You don't have to be quite as meticulous with it. And let me show you how we could continue to embellish this. This time I am going to clean my brush off very well, and I'm going to determine what color I might like the flower to be. So I'm going to go with the blues here. I've got 3 blues to choose from, and various shades, light, medium, and dark. So again, I'm gonna start with my lighter color, and I'm gonna pop the top on this guy. And when you're covering a large area, of course, use the larger, juicier surface. And I'm gonna put some of that color down. Look at how the color just pours out. Just lots of pigment there to work with, very fun. And again, I'm just depositing, and I'm just staying with a little bit of a boundary away from the edge of the film, so I don't have to be super meticulous with this. And I'm just going in my white areas where there's not a lot of imagery there, right? And I'm gonna go back with my larger brush, making sure that it's clean. I'm gonna pick up some of my rubbing alcohol. And again, I'm just gonna dip down. And you know, I try to make sure that I dip on my paper towel before. I did not that time, but if you have too much of the rubbing alcohol that comes down, it's kind of hard to control. So I always, when I dip into my rubbing alcohol, I usually dip it on the paper towel first to remove some excess. And the more that you manipulate the section, the more that the color bleed will happen, and you can just soak up and get some of these really soft, beautiful transitions. And so I'm just really softening those lines, just focusing on the larger parts. And working in small sections helps, because the longer it sits on the film, the harder it is to agitate the edges so that you can blend. It's still possible, it's just you have to work it for a minute just to soften that material back up once it sets. Now, you could work on the front surface and have your colors be more intense. That's also a possibility. However, the alcohol could take the ink off when you are actually using the alcohol on the surface. So you would want to fix it on with some workable fixative in order to maintain the integrity of that. But I love the frosted, muted colors that show up on this opaque film. So you could also do a clear film. The inkjet film also comes in just a clear, and then that way, if you like the vibrancy of these colors and you want it to be super bold, then you could totally go with that and have a little bit more rich pigment and color. I like the frosted just because I like the muted tones, especially when I'm using them in journal entries, because a lot of times my backgrounds and stuff are already really colorful. So, plus with the clear, if it lets so much of that background information come through, I usually can't see as much of the detail. All right, so I'm just working this blue within. I'm gonna flip it over to check how it's looking. Look at that. It's really soft. I can take the fine tip and put some more color down. I'm going to use this different blue this time, and I'm going to use my fine tip and just go in with a little bit brighter blue. Being a little bit more intentional with my marks, meaning that I am trying to be crisp even though I know I'm going to blend them out. But I can use this fine tip to deposit the material in these smaller spaces where I was having difficulty before. I even see some spaces that I missed. And I'm going to go around these central parts. There's the little pieces of stamen that are in there that I want to work around. Okay. And now, because they're tight spaces, I'm going to use my number 4 flat brush. You can also mop up some colors, so if something comes out too intense and you want to lift, you can pull some of that color back out. But my main goal here is to just soften the edges. And I just love the durability of the bristles of this brush because they can just really take the soft agitation and still really hold a beautiful shape. Very excited about that. And it's not that I'm scrubbing, I'm not putting a hard pressure on this. I'm just allowing the color to seep through. I'm gonna add a little bit more color here, so I can deposit and then just immediately soften. Just want more of the blended color. Now with the finer tip, I'm not leaving as much color as I did with the thick juicy tip, which is good because there's a little bit more control, but you may just want to work alternately. Just don't leave the cap off your marker too long where you could run the risk of drying it out, because you know alcohol dries it evaporates really quickly. So see, this really nice, beautiful color that we can blend through. Put some on this side, and then just soften it out. Okay. Now I'm going to come through with my stamen, and I'm going to use this smaller tip and put some orange in here. And again, take my small tip, make sure that all the blue's out. Tapping on my paper towel to get rid of the excess, because I just want enough of this orange to just kind of soften the intensity of that color. I don't really want to drag the blue in too much and mute that. Just some nice soft orange. You see how that shows up and translates? Very nice. Okay, and then one thing we can do is go in and embellish with some violet or some purple. I've got this very beautiful purple color here. I'm just going to put a little bit toward the bases of the flowers. And you can actually leave some hard lines if you like as well. You don't have to blend everything, but I just want to blend some of this purple through just so that I can get some of the warmth from the red that's mixed in with the purple, just so that it's not a blue flower totally. And so I'm just softening that up in there just for, again, for visual interest. A lot of the purple is going to be concealed with the black that was put in there. The more color that you can add, the more beautiful translucent colors and the more prismatic the flower will look on the other side. See how there's just that soft warmth coming from the flower now? Very beautiful. Okay, and then we'll just continue on our process. We'll be able to go through and I'll work some of the moths here if I wanted to create like a soft color. Again, always starting with my brighter color. So I've got my yellow that I will work in here for the moth itself, and I'll put that on the lighter color of the wings. Deposit, deposit, deposit. And then very quickly use a large brush. Make sure all my blue's out. Tap and spread to soften the yellow down. See how nice and soft it is, and then we can go back and embellish with some brown if we like. I've got some additional leaves. I could even treat this flower bud coming out, making sure that I have some dark blue. It's going to be kind of bright, so I'll just add a little bit of the lighter blue here with it. Let that be an emergent flower bud. And take these, look at that pop of color, bam. Okay, and then I can just transition right into my greens. So I'll come back with the original green that I'm working with. Pick a tool for the job. So again, if it's a larger area, you can use the flat, broad tip and just really deposit your color down. I'm really careful not to touch my areas because I'm going to use the rubbing alcohol to blend. So there's no need to go right up to the edge. I can just let it, dissipate as it goes through. I don't have to be super close with it. And again, pick a tool for the job. So if you feel like these areas are getting a little tight, just switch to another color. And if you have a little mismark like I did here, just immediately take a brush and push it toward the direction that you want it to soften up so that you can have it be real subtle. So I'm pushing it this way. That way I can just use the color, and I'm going to come back in here with my soft small brush and move that green around so that I can make sure it's represented everywhere. But again, this doesn't have to be exact. That's why I love the printing on the back side, because you can just be general. You don't have to let the perfectionist creep out. You can just let it be more playful, more meditative. Okay, covering those broad areas. You can always flip over just to see how things are progressing to determine whether you want the darker colors or not. So let's skip down. I'm going to do a little bit with this caterpillar here, and I'm going to put some more of the orange in, I believe, with him. Just make him a part of these 1600 prints is that they often, did a lot of the insect studies with the flowers. So all of these have like a real dual appeal. I've got the insects and the flowers going on at the same time. Something kind of unique. Just softening that orange down. And then again, we can see it's just a glow that helps differentiate him from the leaf. And then of course I can go back in with my sketch marker and do a little bit more of the leaf here. Deposit, deposit. Now, even though this is a light color, because of the hatching and cross-hatching that's happening with the black, it's not allowing the color to be as dark. Or excuse me, as light. The lines through here. Let me just focus on depositing real quick. Okay, so because the lines are a little bit more closer together, they're only going to let a certain amount of color pass through. So if the area is real dark, even though I'm using a light color, it'll still appear dark. Do you see how down here in the leaf, because there's so much black lines, even though I didn't use a dark green, it's not really, it's still showing up as a dark green because the black is only filtering through a certain amount of color. So I'm just really gonna let myself be really playful here, just being careful around the edges. Pushing the color around. I can always redeposit more color. Put some of the green, darker green in there. Now I'm getting into these tighter areas, so I'm going to use my smaller brush. Okay, and then I'm going to come in with my darker green and maybe just put, just some accents, just so it's not limited. Take my alcohol brush and just smudge some of that out. Very beautiful. Again, if you wanted to leave some of the mark making stronger to indicate that, you could certainly do that as well. And then I'm just going to accentuate some of these. Just again, I don't like using color by itself. So, rather than have just a flat green section, I'd always prefer to add just a little bit of other color in there, just to help something sing, just to give it a little bit of interest. And again, the black marks are in there so they can kind of guide you as where to go. The places where it's darker is where I can add more color. Working very quickly, letting the alcohol to do its thing and blend the colors together. some more orange here. Soft orange. And then I might just put little touches of brown. And of course, we don't want to forget this little guy up here. So I'll do some brown for the body, some yellow, a little bit of brown blended in for the wing. And maybe just because we have the orange integrated, we can put a little bit of orange in there. And again, we'll just use a small brush loaded with the alcohol, and we'll just blend those colors together. Nice, beautiful, warm tones. Some hard mark making and some soft mark making. And then I'll just use the residue just to come and work on this little caterpillar guy that's here. Little worm that I didn't see it before. And I'm gonna add a little bit of yellow to him, help him stand out. There's a little worm there. And just take my soft edge and blend some of that out. A little bit more here. Okay, and you see how intense the color is on this side, but when we flip it over, again, we just have a very soft, delicate, frosted look. You can see the translucent colors that are shining through, just really offering that very subtle vintage look. And then we can just use a soft gel gloss or any adhesive. Mod Podge would work, but I love using soft gel gloss from Golden. It'll give it a nice adhesion, and you can just clip out and then position it on your journal page as we looked at in the beginning. Something soft like this, and then just position wherever you like so that you have your entry. And then you can do additional writing with white paint pen or whatever to accentuate, so you can really build these pages up. So I hope that helps. Again, if you are interested in the supplies or materials, we'll put a link attached below, but using the Marabu alcohol sketch graphic markers, a little bit of rubbing alcohol, 91%, and featuring also the graphics computer matte film for inkjet. And then also we were using the Dynasty Black Silver brushes. I used a number 4 and a number 10 just to kind of distribute the material. So I hope that this was helpful for you, and we hope to see you for more projects in the future.